Hey everyone, Yoshi the Warrior here, again with another video of another intellectual, engaging conversation with bright, engageable scholars within the YouTube comments section. Uh, I'll tell you what, man, like it really kind of like hurts a lot when people don't realize there's a difference between a cultural definition versus an academic definition. Now, just like in my last video, I'm going to make this point abundantly clear so people don't misconstrue me. Just because I am okay with the idea of second cousin marriage being legal does not mean A, I do it, or B, I endorse it. Me personally, I do find it disgusting. But because I find it disgusting does not mean I will go out my way to stop other people from doing it just simply because I find it disgusting. Because scientifically and academically, it shows that there is no real world harm, not only between the two, but also to the birth of that child. So while I do find it icky, that's not an argument. Just like how a person find owning a gun immoral and they don't like guns because they think guns kill people, but there are people out there that have that opinion, but they also still respect the opinion of others being able to own a gun for their individual purposes of either A, defending their family, themselves, the people around them, or their nation that they live in. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you are like wondering, like, what is this about? Well, this is about the whole Alex kerfuffle from like Street Fighter 6, for those who do not know. Street Fighter character Alex from a game called Street Fighter, which, let's be honest, no one gives two shits and a solid fuck about the story. Uh, the story usually consists of just like, what, 10 lines of like dialogue, and that's pretty much it. And people are freaking out because of this character named Alex, who never had little to no backstory to begin with, was somehow in a quote unquote incestual relationship with a adoptive sister second cousin, which from my investigation looks more like a mistranslation than anything else, because I'm like, this man has no backstory whatsoever and it's not even that fleshed out. So I don't think that was like really the case, but nonetheless, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to say, well, it wasn't a mistranslation. It was like some type of woke agenda where they were trying to normalize incest or second cousin marriage or whatever. Okay, my thing here is this. Which one is it? Because if the company's woke, that would mean that the translators don't know how to do their job, which means it is a mistranslation. But at the same time, because it was a white character and it made white people look like bastards, all of a sudden the woke people knew what the hell they were doing and the translations were factual? And this is why I do not engage in cultural war bullshit, because what happens is these types of people end up trying to redefine words in order for them to skew the narrative for political cultural gain. And that is effectively what happened in this conversation with Mr. Hellion M2D. What a conversation we ended up having. So I'll just go ahead and start with my original comment. People freaking out about the story when they literally live in the US where marrying your second cousin is legal, but it's an extremely rare occasion. The reason it is legal is because the risky factor of harming the child in terms of birth is extremely low, and simply saying it's icky is not an argument to ban it. The people whose argument is as such would lose a debate with Muslim on child marriage hands down. We live in a timeline where the pseudo-intelligent one wins the debate, and there are people who can argue in favor of child marriage. Better wise up, because icky ain't an argument. Only for this guy to come in screaming, 3% is not extremely low. Incest, man. Okay, so what is he referring to? He's referring to the amount of DNA that is shared amongst the marital relationship of the parents. So, say for instance, in terms of like very close siblings by the original definition, first of all, let's actually go by the root definition of the word incest. And the root definition of the word incest, based on the 50 states' laws that prohibits sexual relations or marriage between very close relatives, includes parents and children, grandparents or grandchildren, full or half siblings, aunts, uncles, and nieces and nephews. And it says down here, some states also include first cousins in the incest definition, or ban first cousin marriage, which it actually does make sense because first cousin marriage, based on this chart, shows that it shares a 12.5% chance of harming the birth of the child in terms of genetic defects or birth disorders. So then the cultural definition of incest would be not person who is having marital relations with immediate people within their family, but rather any person having marital relations with anyone within their family is somehow considered incest. And I can show you how this person's actually operating off of that cultural definition as opposed to the academic definition. Then I responded, actually, I don't have to have an argument with a slack-jawed culture warrior whose intelligence is measured by what a YouTuber says, because clearly you got that from a YouTuber, because a lot of people don't know what they're talking about when you think distant relative equals incest, when the definition for incest is close relative. Those are not the same. And then he responds, "You are the culture warrior." And then he responds, "Accusing your opponent of what you're doing isn't going to work here. Literally any person in real life will look at you funny if you tell them you're marrying your second cousin, asswipe." That's not an argument. Just because the culture deems it so doesn't mean they are right. You're literally making a mob rule argument. You're saying because democracy says that 2 plus 2 equals 10, and because the majority of the US population believes 2 plus 2 is 10, we have to assume 2 plus 2 is 10 because 51% of the US population said 2 plus 2 is 10. That's not an argument. It's not rooted in any factual statement or any scientific data. You're just saying the mob says so, so therefore the mob says so. The mob is not an argument. Intelligence is an argument. I am explaining my position through academics and biology. You are explaining your position because the culture has a gun to your head, and you're saying, well, I'm abiding by the culture because if I don't abide by the culture will kill me. And then this guy jumps in saying, dude, he's saying you're being a culture warrior because you're making it about politics like the rest of the NPCs are. First of all, how am I making it about politics? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I never brought it out about politics because the whole discussion itself has already been political ever since it was a kerfuffle by the internet population. The internet made it political by nature. I'm just chiming in my own opinion. And despite the fact that you guys consider me the minority, how am I making it political when no one listens to me? That's a contradiction. Because the second people start talking about this, what's the first thing that's popping up? Woke this. Capcom's woke. Japan is weird and it's icky and it's creepy. You literally have people like mimicking what's that guy Johnny Somali talking about nuke Hiroshima, bomb Hiroshima. How am I making it political, but they're not making it political? And then I responded, first of all, anything part of culture is downstream to politics. Second, not once did I tell people to vote Republican or they're all doomed. You can support whatever idea you want, excuse me, but in regards to the topic of second cousin marriage, the user is wrong. Also, we're operating on different core definitions. One of the defining traits of a culture warrior is one who redefines definitions for the sake of the political agenda by any means necessary. Your definition of culture warrior is different from mine, so I'll let you define that, and I'll engage with your definition, which he never really responded. So they never really have a definition because they operate off of what other people tell them. So by my definition, I'm not a culture warrior because I literally run a channel pissing on Republicans and Democrats. Because bringing up the subject of incest will lead into politics. Go into any other channel talking about this, and I'll guarantee you they're making it mostly about Japan being creepy. Sucks that is the way the internet is forming, but that's the internet of today. Now explain why me pointing out a real-life threatening issue such as Muslims invading Western countries to implement Sharia law, which would legitimize child marriage, is me being a culture warrior. Then explain why Hellion M2D's redefinition of incest is not being a culture warrior when it follows the same bastardizing formula of watering down the term like racism, which has led to political divisions because of its redefinition. Being a culture warrior is just the relabeling of the word propagandist, which requires the tool redefining words to make propaganda effective. So then how am I a propagandist culture warrior when what I am saying is fundamentally and scientifically true? And then I respond again because I haven't really gotten a response from Hellion. Can't answer the question all of a sudden. And then he responds with, I was told, never waste your words on a fool who won't listen. That would be you. Funny how instead of just answering the question of how am I redefining the word incest, he wants to do this little saying thing so he doesn't have to like engage with the conversation. So I'm not wasting any more words trying to reason with a brick wall who isn't human. I just think incest is wrong. You still have about 3% defect chance with second cousins, so it's still incest for many people. That is not an argument, and I'll explain to you why that is not an argument. You should not hinge your entire argument of incest on 3%, and I'll tell you why. When you do that, you're saying everyone in a marriage, irregardless of the fact that their marriage is unrelated, is incest, because the birth rate because of the rate in birth defects and genetic disorders is the same with unrelated marriages. Because it says right here, in terms of the baseline risk for unrelated couples, the general population risk of a child having a significant birth defect and any other type of like birth issues or genetic disorders is approximately 2 to 4%, which is in the same bracket as second cousin marriages. So by your argument, because all marriages have a birth defect rate that is the same as second cousin marriages, they should all be considered icky and illegal. Or even worse, you're making the argument that unrelated marriages are far more ickier and ancestral than second cousin marriages, because unrelated marriages have a birth defect issue of 4%, which is higher than second cousin marriages. He literally just probably Googled the information, looked at the chart and said, well, it's 3%, so therefore 3% is just too many. Without realizing he's taking the same percentage from unrelated marriages that has the same birth rate in terms of defects and genetic disorders as unrelated marriages. He has no idea what he's talking about, which is essentially the watered down definition of the word incest, which is person who is in a close relationship, a relationship with close blood relatives. That's the key word, close blood relatives. Now, am I arguing that just because second cousin marriage does not fall into incest, everyone should do it? No, I'm not arguing that. My argument is If that's what you're okay with, do it, because there is no harm factor. If you're not okay with it, even if you cannot make an argument and your only argument is icky, you don't have to do it, and that's fine. But my argument against those who say that it is icky is that you cannot call it harmful when your entire basis is not off an academic basis, but a cultural basis. Because at that point, if the culture by mob rule said tomorrow that adults can have sexual relationships with minors, you would have to go with them because the majority of your country said so. That's not an argument. It's not. And there's a reason why I have like discussions with people like this in the YouTube comment section, is because we are living in a political climate. I don't give two shits on the fuck that you find politics disgusting. Unfortunately, we are in a political climate where the pseudo-intelligent person by the name of Daniel Hakikachu and many other people like him can explain their position in a pseudo-intellectual level of why it is perfectly fine for a grown man to have sexual relations with a minor. And your position and how you argue why you believe second cousin marriage is just, it shouldn't be performed, and you think it's incest, is quite literally on the same pseudo-intellectual level of Daniel Hakikachu arguing why it's perfectly fine for an adult to have sexual marital relations with a child. Because the culture said so, therefore the culture is right. Well, their God said so, so therefore their God is right. So what makes you any different than them? They have machetes. They have people willing to suicide bomb you to death. What do you have? I have the culture. The culture says that it's wrong, so therefore the culture. I just follow orders. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Well, that was a very entertaining conversation that I had, and that just kind of let me know about one thing. Never expect an intellectual conversation from a cultural zeitgeist. Leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Until then, take care and be safe, and God bless.